The illusion of stability is a fragile glass cathedral, and today we are listening to the sound of it shattering. For 70 years, the world operated under a singular, unspoken guarantee that the word of the American president was the bedrock of global security. But look at the wreckage of the last 48 hours. We are witnessing something far more dangerous than a failed diplomatic maneuver or a poorly executed ceasefire. We are witnessing the formal abdication of American reliability. How did we get here? How did we move from a global superpower that commanded the seas to a nation that watches helplessly as the Strait of Hormuz, the literal jugular vein of the global energy supply, is turned into a private toll booth for the Iranian regime? Just 5 weeks ago, 20% of the world's oil flowed through those waters without a second thought. Today, Iran doesn't just threaten that flow. They control its rhythm, opening and closing the gates like a landlord deciding who gets to enter a building they didn't build but now own. The rhetoric we've heard was supposed to be a masterclass in the art of the deal. We were promised irreversible threats and the protection of whole civilizations. Instead, we got a bucket. We were promised a knockout blow to Iran's nuclear ambitions, yet their enriched uranium program sits in a shroud of total uncertainty, more shielded by this chaos than ever before. This isn't just a policy failure. It is a psychological earthquake. When the leader of the free world makes threats that cannot be unsaid and then buckles under the first sign of economic pressure, the signals sent to the rest of the world are profound. We aren't just talking about headlines anymore. We are talking about the deep tectonic shifts in how power is perceived. The international community isn't just shocked, they are mourning the death of certainty. As Denmark's foreign minister pointed out with chilling bluntness, the world is decidedly a worse place than it was yesterday. The genie of American unreliability is out of the bottle, and there is no magic, no rhetoric, and no amount of military posturing that can force it back in. We have entered an era where our allies are no longer looking to us for leadership, they are looking for an exit strategy. They are rewiring their economies, recalculating their defense pacts, and making plans for a future where the United States is not a partner, but a volatile, transactional entity that might abandon them at the stroke of a pen or the whim of a late-night social media post. The question is no longer whether we are the most powerful nation on Earth. We are. The question is whether that power means anything when the hand holding the lever is seen as shaky, unpredictable, and ultimately unwilling to stand by its own word. We have traded long-term strategic dominance for a short-term, hollow win that has left our adversaries stronger and our friends terrified. This is the new reality, a world where the Strait of Hormuz is a pay-to-play zone, and the American flag is no longer a shield, but a do not disturb sign on a retreating empire. The dust hasn't even settled on the latest ceasefire announcement, and already the ground is shifting beneath our feet. To understand the gravity of this moment, we have to look past the televised handshakes and examine the cold, hard mechanics of the status quo. We were told that a new deal was the only way to prevent a catastrophic escalation, but the reality on the water tells a different story. Not even 24 hours after the supposed breakthrough, the Associated Press confirmed what intelligence officials feared most. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. Again, this isn't just a temporary logistics hiccup. This is a fundamental restructuring of global energy security. For decades, the United States Navy acted as the ultimate guarantor of freedom of navigation. That wasn't just a lofty maritime principle. It was the invisible hand that kept global inflation in check and ensured that energy moved from the Persian Gulf to the factories of Europe and the cities of Asia without attacks from hostile actors. But the current administration's approach has effectively handed the keys of the global economy to Tehran. The strategic irony is staggering. When the first Trump administration exited the JCPOA, the stated goal was to starve the Iranian regime of the blood money used to fund proxy wars and missile programs. Fast forward to today, and the maximum pressure rhetoric has been replaced by a maximum concession reality. By allowing Iran to exercise discretionary control over the strait, we haven't just given them a seat at the table, we've given them the power to set the price of the meal. The fees they are now proposing for passage a literal toll on global commerce will dwarf any sanctions relief ever discussed in previous decades. We are witnessing the birth of a new economic superpower, funded not by their own industry, but by the ransom of the global energy supply. Meanwhile, the unbreakable threats of the past few weeks have evaporated into a mist of uncertainty. What happened to the irreversible consequences for Iran's nuclear enrichment? The enriched uranium program, the very heart of the conflict, remains an enigma. We have traded clarity for a temporary pause, leaving the underlying threat completely intact while stripping ourselves of the leverage to address it later. The world looks at this and sees a superpower that is physically massive but strategically paralyzed. The psychological context here is perhaps more damaging than the military one. In the world of high-stakes intelligence, we speak of signals versus noise. The noise is the presidential rhetoric, the loud, theatrical threats, and the claims of winning. The signal, however, is the buckling. The signal is when the leader of the world's most powerful military finds a strategic reason to fold the moment a regional power shows some teeth. Our adversary is not just Iran, but Russia and China are master students of these signals. They have watched the United States make a threat, witness a reaction, and then retreat. This isn't just about one region. It's about the global perception of American resolve. When you threaten a whole civilization and then settle for a deal that fails to resolve a single core issue, you aren't being a tough negotiator. You are signaling that your threats are negotiable. You are signaling that the red lines are actually written in disappearing ink. The context of today is a world that has realized the emperor's new clothes are actually a white flag, and they are adjusting their own sails accordingly. From Copenhagen to Tokyo, the realization is sinking in. The security architecture of the last 70 years was built on the assumption of American consistency. Today, that assumption is dead. We are now operating in a world of contingency plans. When the United States becomes an unreliable partner, it forces even our closest allies to look for new best friends, or at the very least, to stop relying on our protection. This is the context of a vacuum. And as any student of history knows, nature and geopolitics abhors a vacuum. There is a profound, almost tragic irony in where we stand today. We are the wealthiest, most technologically advanced, and militarily dominant civilization in human history. Yet, as we watch the signals coming out of the Persian Gulf and the corridors of Davos, it's clear that our power has become a stranded asset. We are like a giant who has forgotten that strength is not measured by the size of one's fist, but by the weight of one's word. Once that word is broken, once the world realizes that our irreversible threats are merely opening bids in a desperate negotiation, the foundation of our global influence doesn't just crack, it liquefies. We must face a hard truth. The world is decidedly a worse place than it was 40 days ago. Not because of the threat of war is a constant in human history, but because of the death of the reliable partner. When the leader of the free world becomes an unpredictable variable, everyone else is forced to become a survivalist. This is the genie in the bottle that intelligence officials warn about. You can sign 100 more ceasefires and you can tweet 1,000 more victories, but you cannot force your allies to trust you again once they have already started making plans for your absence. The philosophical shift we are witnessing is a move from covenant to contract. A covenant is a long-term sacred bond based on shared values and mutual defense. It is what built NATO and the modern Pacific alliances. A contract is a temporary, transactional agreement where both parties are looking for the exit the moment the terms no longer favor them. By treating our global responsibilities as a series of deals to be won or lost on a 24-hour news cycle, we have effectively resigned from our role as the world's stabilizer. We have traded our 70-year legacy of leadership for the fleeting satisfaction of a bucket and a temporary pause in hostilities. The warning here is not just for the politicians in Washington, but for all of us. The strength we have benefited from, the economic stability, the freedom of the seas, the power of the dollar, was not a gift of nature. It was a product of the world's belief in American consistency. If we continue on this path, we will find that being rich and powerful is not enough. You can be rich and still be isolated. You can be powerful and still be ignored. As the Strait of Hormuz becomes a pay-to-play zone and our besties in Tokyo and Rome turn their backs to us to draft their own futures, we are left with a sobering realization. Power without reliability is just noise. And in the silent, cold reality of the new geopolitics, the world is moving on. They're rewiring the house, and for the first time in nearly a century, they're doing it without us. The lights are still on in the American house, but outside, the rest of the world has already started building a different city. This is the end of the era of certainty and the beginning of the era of the transaction. And in a transactional world, the only thing that matters is the price, and right now, the price of American leadership has never been lower.